right. Welcome to week 2 of Give Her the Mic, episode 2. We're so happy you guys are here. I hope you watched episode 1. It was kind of an intro to who we are, why we're doing this. If you didn't, definitely make sure you go back and watch it. And for episode 2, we are going to really get into some things. And I do want to be really honest at first about this episode. And that's kind of, why we're in sweats. I'm about to put my leg up on the chair here in a second. We're going to talk about some really hard things. One of those things is going to be abortion. And I just want to say that if you're not in a place in your life where you feel like you can listen to anything about that open and honestly, and you need to come back to this episode at another time, that's completely fine. We're also going to be talking about domestic abuse and things like that and trauma. So it's going to be a heavy episode, but it also is something that most people are not ready or willing to openly talk about. And it's definitely abuse of all kinds it happens every single day. And a lot of times people don't realize that it's abuse. So this is a super important episode, and I hope you're ready. And we're very cozy, and we got tissues. So
let's roll.
Bottoms up, sis.
Let's roll.
Bottoms up.
So, yeah, I mean, this is going to be a topic about some really deep-rooted false belief systems, which we talked about
100%.
earlier when we were going over this episode, that really create who we grow up to be as women. And, we talked a lot in episode 1 about our personality types and how we are. And, this is going to be hopefully eye-opening and healing for women that hear it is not your fault. And we live in a culture now where we're told, it's okay to not be okay, but don't stay there. And that's turned into you don't have the right to be upset or to do these things. But the reality is if you are unhealed in those areas, in those rooted areas from whatever trauma it may be, it's not your fault because you don't have the tools yet. And I remember like the first time I got to therapy, my therapist told me that. She was like, you're being so hard on yourself. She was like, and you don't have one tool. How are you supposed to know what to do? And so, yeah, I am excited to do the hard things because I know that this is going to help so many people and also will be like healing for us because we haven't talked about this to really anyone at all.
No.
And I really feel like with you, I know so much about your past. And Kristen grew up in Boston. If y'all didn't know that, now y'all know. And so city life,
the hoops.
yeah, city
Fly where the
life.
hoops.
She didn't have a license until she was. How old were you? 18 or 19 when you got a license?
I was 19.
Because you were taking the train.
I took the train. I took the bus everywhere I went. Yeah, I was literally raised in the city, right outside of Boston in Quincy.
Yeah.
And I'm so proud of it, y'all.
And it was so crazy because I feel like the trauma you're about to talk about this time, you're going to walk our listeners through, which this episode is on survival. She survived it is the topic. But, you've walked me through a little bit about some things that happened when you were a teenager. And actually, I didn't even think about this when both of our, you were 14 and I was 14.
I had just turned 15.
Okay.
And I was just turned 15.
Yeah. And I was 14 and 15.
Yeah,
it's
I had just
so
got to
weird.
high school. Just got to high school.
Yeah.
I was kind of an ugly duckling. I remember in middle school. I guess I would say an ugly duckling. I just grew into myself more so right before my freshman year of high school. I remember I dyed my hair blonde that summer right before.
Didn't we all? Bleach
Pulled
blonde.
it through the cap. Did you pull your always?
For sure.
I always pulled it through the cap.
For sure, like you're sitting in the bathroom and there's the sink, and then you're sitting on the sink and you got the cap on and you're wearing the gloves. Sometimes you're not.
Sometimes you're not, and your hands are burning. You're like, I'll just wash them real quick. It'll be okay. But also, did you ever? I so remember this. I would take the cap off and I would go to brush through my hair, and sometimes, actually more times than not, there would be a lot of hair in the brush. Like, I would be like, is my hair going to survive this? And it would be kind of gummy too.
Yeah.
I was like, this is not well. But anywho, completely off topic. But I grew up in Boston. I grew up right outside the city. My parents were always working. They worked like, 24/7, 6 days a week. I was definitely a low-key kid. I think you see a lot of that up north, especially in the city, because it's so expensive to live
And you're a
there.
middle child.
Yeah.
Middle
I
children
was a
are
middle
different.
child. I was a middle
I feel
child.
like sometimes middle
Yeah,
children get like forgotten.
for sure. And I was always very independent, very go with the flow, very like, if somebody was going to get it done, it was going to be me. That's always been my personality, anyways. So I didn't have a lot of like, I mean, I was a low-key kid. My parents weren't there, and I literally could do anything that I kind of wanted because they weren't around.
So scary too, like being in a city like that
In
with
a city, walking
so many drugs and so much like
so much,
danger and
so
stuff that
much.
you were just kind of out and about.
Yes. And I was lucky because my parents actually didn't drink a lot at all. Like I wasn't around alcohol growing up.
Good.
And but then, so like I said, I was an ugly duckling in middle school, got to high school. It was like everybody was noticing me and I was like, what is this? What's going on? I remember this one guy, Sean Cheney, he noticed me. He was a senior. And he asked me like to sneak out one night. And I was like, why would I not want to sneak out? Like, of
Yeah,
course I want to do
that's
this.
just like what you
Okay.
did
I don't think that
during that time.
and I know my sister wasn't home because I feel like she definitely wouldn't have let me do it, or she would have like been an asshole about it and I would have been like, I'm going anyways. But I strongly remember her not being there because I had to call her later that night. So yeah, I snuck out with him. I went to his house. He was having a party. There were a bunch of people there. And I had never been to a party either. Like, I just didn't grow up that way. My parents, like, not saying they were shut, but they just, like, I don't know. My parents are hippies. They used to, like, grow things in the backyard. They didn't drink, like, didn't party. Like, I
Yeah.
just grew up different, I guess you would say, until they started working all the time. And that was a thing that changed drastically too. When I was growing up, probably until I was like maybe 10, my mom was at home. She had a
Okay, I did not know
daycare.
that
Yeah,
she was
she
at
always
home.
worked
Okay.
from home until we moved to Texas, came back, and then when I got to middle school, she worked 24/7. She had to survive because we moved to the city. So, anywho, got to his house. There was a party. He fed me lots of drinks.
Yeah.
Lots of drinks. I had
Yeah.
never drank even hardly a sip of alcohol in my life.
Wow.
Yeah, nothing.
Sorry, I'm
And I
shocked by
wanted,
that.
yeah, it was, yeah, no, I hadn't. But I remember feeling uncomfortable on the couch. There were a lot of people there. And so he kept handing me them. People kept handing me them. So I would just drink them because I felt uncomfortable. And
Yeah.
it made me feel a little bit better, I guess, in some way.
Yeah.
I must have been feeling the alcohol because I'd never felt it before. And then I just remember feeling super woozy. I was still on the couch. And I remember him picking me up and bringing me upstairs.
So do you think he probably roofied you?
He either roofied me or I was so drunk to a point that I was about to black out but wasn't completely blackout. You know what I'm saying? You've probably been there too. Like I was very, very, very drunk.
Oh, yeah.
And then he brought me upstairs and he raped me.
I'm so sorry.
And that was the first time. I had obviously never had sex with anybody. I had never really been around boys in general, I'd kissed one guy, that was it. That was it. And so
Walk me through what happened, like, if you want to, like, immediately after. So after it happened, like...
So I do remember too what the craziest part was is during it. So, and Chloe and I have talked about this. Thank God she's gone through some EDMR, correct? There's a certain kind of trauma therapy that brings you back to certain moments of trauma. Because I do remember now, thankfully, a good amount of it. But for years, I remembered hardly any of it. And then over the years, since I've healed more, I do remember, like, instead of just like flashes of pictures, I remember more moments and things for sure. But I remember a guy came in during it and he started video recording, like some kind of thing he had in his hand. It was some kind of camera. And then I remember after he was done, and that was a thing that for years I really struggled with because I think I remember saying no at one point, but to be honest, I really just like laid there and cried and screamed because I was so drunk that it was like I had no words. And I
Yeah.
also had no idea what was happening.
Yeah.
And I was just scared.
It's disgusting.
So I just couldn't even speak. I just, and then I remember afterwards there was blood obviously on the sheets because I had never had sex before.
Yeah.
And he said something rude to me about that, and I don't remember what it was. I just remember feeling really shameful about the blood. And I wrapped myself up in the covers and I went into the bathroom and I called my sister.
Did she answer?
She did.
What'd you
And I
tell her?
told her that I needed her to come pick me up from Sean's and something had happened. And I needed her to come get me then. And she did. She came right on and I went home but she never asked me what happened.
Yeah. What about your parents, like your mom? Did you?
So my mom we never really spoke about it. We weren't like that. Me and my mom didn't talk openly about things, I guess. I didn't have a relationship with my mom that I was comfortable being honest and truthful with her. I think, unfortunately, my parents, I was always very free-spirited and kind of like a wild child. And instead of them embracing that part of me, they tried to control me too much and put a lot of limits on me, which I understand in parenting is necessity, but this very traumatic thing happened to me and I didn't tell anybody. So right afterwards, I just started drinking and going out with my friends and not coming home and things like that. And instead of them being like, something's wrong with my daughter,
Yeah.
and stopping, and I think that's so important as parenting. You have to really watch your kids and know your kids enough to know that like something's wrong.
Yeah.
Something's happened.
Yeah.
This is not the way my kid was before.
Yeah.
And to stop and have that conversation with them. And, kids are deflective, especially teens. It doesn't matter. You keep trying.
Yeah.
And I think that's where a lot of parents go wrong when they have teens is that they try. And I hear parents say it all the time with teens. They're like, she's just rebellious. I've tried with her. She won't talk to me. But it's like, but how many times have you tried?
Right.
And how
That
many
part.
times is enough? Never. It's never enough times. So instead of my parents stopping and, really digging in, trying to figure out what happened to me, they just tried to control me. And they would, ground me and things like that and yell at me and tell my mom actually, it was probably 6 months later, I think maybe a year, I don't remember. She picked me up one night because I was super drunk on the side of the road, probably in the ghetto. And because, I lived in the city and there were a lot of really bad neighborhoods around there. Like terrible.
I can't even imagine.
Terrible.
I really
And
can't.
I was walking around at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 15 years old,
Probably like drugs everywhere.
Oh, just anything that you wanted, you could get. It was wild. I would say 75% of my high school class is gone, which
Yeah.
is very sad. People that, were very close to me. But she picked me up. I was super drunk, and she brought me to the police station, and we sat out there in the car, and she, instead of, Mom, I love you, but you should have done this different. And that's the thing. Sometimes we look back in our lives, and there's, I'm not a perfect parent, and there's so many things looking back, especially after my divorce, that I would have done differently for my kids. But we do, at that moment, think we're doing right by our children, and I don't fault anyone for that. But she told me that she was going to put a chins on me, which means that she would sign me over to the state and they would pretty much control me and have control over that point because she couldn't control me anymore. Her and my dad had no control anymore.
I'm going to say this, and I love your mom. I love, my history with my parents and stuff. That is not okay. Like, that's not okay. And, like, respectfully, I think telling your child essentially that you're done with them and essentially abandoning them and putting them out and saying that is very disturbing to me, regardless of, because we're mothers now and we can speak on this. And we'll get into this as we get more into family topics and our family history, but that's not okay. And we parent very differently because we know things that are done really have an impact on our kids. And I watch the way your boys are. They are so respectful. Yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, so kind. They are so much better than you. And that's our
Thank
goal, is for
God.
our kids to be better than us.
Thank
But I just
God.
want you to know that was not okay that she said and did that. And I'm allowed to say that as your best friend. And I really don't care what the excuse is, because this is why so many women are unhealed, because we were made to believe that our parents did our best instead of them being accountable to the shit they did that put us in this place of where we are today.
That
And they
part.
are the ones that are going to have to be responsible for the lack of parenting whenever they get to heaven. That's going to be up to them and God. But also, it's not okay. And I'm black and white. And I love that you are more gray and understanding and graceful. But I feel some kind of way about that, because to literally essentially give up on your child when you don't even know they were raped is very disturbing. Because we've had conversations in the past where you feel like your mom did know a little bit more than what happened, right? And so I think this is like a learning opportunity where it's like that was probably a moment for you
Oh,
in the
yeah.
sand where you were like, I'm not loved.
100%.
I don't matter.
100%.
They don't give a shit about me. They're done with me. And yeah, they can
100%.
say A, B, and C, and D. This is why they did it. But you don't abandon your child. Ever. Ever. I would never, ever abandon my child and take him to the police station. That is not okay. And I haven't been in that position as a mother. And so I'm sure there's a lot viewers could say on this. But my initial reaction is there's shame and abandonment right there after you had already been raped.
Yeah.
I
Well,
hate
and
that.
to me, I always say that what kids need the most is love and safety. Love and safety.
Yep.
And if you don't feel those two things as a child, you are already missing something.
Yeah.
And you can't get through things. I mean, and like you said, it literally shapes you. Everything that you go through as a child, the way your parents are, what you see, what you hear, what you eat, all of it shapes you as a person, every single part of it, And after that, I made a lot of choices in relationships with males. Of course. How could I not? You know what I'm saying? Like I didn't talk to anybody about it, period. I remember my mom at one point said something to me like, I know something happened to you.
Right.
But that was the end of the conversation. There was nothing after that. Like we never spoke of it. I never spoke of it for years and years. I don't even know how long. Probably 5 years ago, if I'm being honest. Like I never even said it out loud. I remember I was at my house with a bunch of girls, and for some reason I was talking about it. And thankfully, this one girl, Hannah, she's so sweet. I was telling the story and she looked at me and she said, "You were raped." And I said, she said, "No, you were raped. Just because you couldn't say no, just because all of these things like, Kristen, you need to say that out loud and you have to move from it." And I'm thankful she did that, because I thought maybe that I had over the years that I probably never really did,
Yeah.
Because you realize after things like that happen to you, especially with women, you get into relationships with males and they're not healthy. You're
Yeah.
looking for love in all the wrong places, if that makes sense.
Right.
I got engaged to a guy in college who literally was terrible to me. Terrible to me. Oh my goodness. I remember jumping out of a car one time while it was moving because he was trying to hit me.
Jumping out of a car.
Jumping out of a car. Like, why
Jumping
are
out
we
of a
even
car.
in a car with a
Jumping
man?
out of a car.
Why would we be in a car with a man that we felt unsafe with in the first place? You know what I'm saying? Like, there's just...
Well, why would you know what safety is whenever you were taken to the police station? and told that you were just going to be dropped off because they don't know what to do with you.
I didn't have safety. Exactly. I didn't have that
When you
trust.
when you don't have it, you don't know what it looks
No,
like.
you don't.
So how did
You
it
don't.
affect some of your like major decision or your major, I guess, like thought process after you had been raped and after you started being like super wild? Like, how did it affect you, like in the workplace, in friendships? I know you talked about relationships, but have you recognized like some behaviors it's created that you've had to heal from today, if that makes sense? Like,
I mean, I would say more so in the male department, not so in the workplace. I would say more so in relationships with men. That is the main place that it really affected me the most, because every man after that I chose to be with did not respect me. They never did. They treated me like pure tea garbage until I finally was like, I am the problem. I am choosing the wrong people. I am allowing the wrong people into my life, the wrong men into my life, and the wrong people into my life.
yeah.
You know, like I had friendships along the way that literally like I would just let people, because of who I am and because you know how much I do care truly about people, but they would abuse me for my kindness all the time.
Yeah.
And I allowed that to happen.
Yeah.
And now I just choose differently for myself because I know that number one, what happened to me when I was 15 was not my fault.
Yeah. And you started therapy
I did.
as well, right?
I started
Years ago.
therapy. I started therapy years ago. Yes, I found an amazing girl. She moved. I'm actually about to get back into therapy, thank goodness, because especially, you know, you guys know when you talk about things, this stuff is heavy, this stuff is deep. It's so important to talk to a third party. It's so important to be in therapy, especially when you're going through a lot of things.
Yeah, tools in the
I
toolbox.
mean, in general, it's good to be in therapy 365 all the time anyways, because life is hard.
Yeah.
It's always hard.
Yeah, we're just
But
a
yeah,
girl. We're
I'm
just, a girl. Well, I'm super proud of you, and I know
you,
like
honey.
that was super, super tough to talk about.
Yeah.
And you know, me and you have talked a lot about how I have never been in that situation before. But I've been around really scary men growing up that my mom was with and stuff. And I can imagine the violation that created of your body. And like, you know, it just shows us that we are not a product of our problems. We are a product of real life traumatic situations that have been
Literally.
completely swept under the rug by culture, that have been, it's fine, give her a pill or give her this or give her that. And there's no therapy. There's no,
Or
you know,
she's exaggerating.
right.
She's exaggerating. She's just emotional.
She's crazy.
Yeah, that part.
She's just crazy.
Yeah.
She's just having a moment.
Yeah,
She's
yeah.
just in high school. She's just this.
Yeah,
she's
she's
just that.
hormonal.
And,
No.
you know, you say this all the time about my daughter, who is 5. You know, you understand her, and she
do.
is emotional, and she's
just
allowed
like
to
me.
be. We
She
have to let
is.
women, specifically women, have emotions, because that's also how God created us to be.
For a purpose.
We are a more emotional being.
Yes.
Because
we're mothers.
We're the caregivers.
Yes.
We're the caregivers,
Yes.
but we also need to be taken care of. So I love that you said that.
Oh, yeah, it's definitely something that shaped, and I'll definitely get into a lot of this. You know, definitely makes you choose differently. And I know you too have been through way too much in your life.
Lots of things. Lots of things. So, yeah.
And yeah, so you tell me, Chloe, about, I know there's many, but maybe there's one in particular that you can think of that was hard.
When I was thinking about trauma, you know, I actually didn't realize that this was a major trauma moment. I needed EMDR therapy on, which is trauma therapy, and also coaching on from a life coach that I see monthly now. But when I was in my normal therapy, I got into therapy, like intense therapy, about 4 years ago. And when I was talking to my therapist, we got on the topic of abortion. And I said it to her so openly because I don't have anybody to talk to about this, because there is, for some strange reason, an attack on women who get abortions.
You're not wrong.
And it's really sad.
Yeah.
And even in the church, there's no help. There's no resources. And I love my church, but it's like, if you go into any church, how many resources are there going to be on women who've had abortions? When the statistics show it's like 1 in 5. It may be even closer since the last time I've looked. But I brought it up to my therapist about 4 years ago, and she said, you know, what healing have you got on this? Like, have you talked to anybody about this? And at this time, like my own husband, who I got both abortions with, he was my boyfriend at the time. He had never even talked to me about it. So when I say it was like so dismissed, like it was awful. And so before I go into my abortions, what I'll say is there is healing in that. And God loves you. And if you are a woman who's had an abortion listening to this podcast, you need to know that there is grace in that, in love. You're not dirty, you're not damaged. Like Jesus died for every single one of us. And so I got 2 abortions. So I was in 9th grade, just like you, 9th grade. It's so weird how much we have in common because I dyed my hair blonde too. I was a cheerleader. Really big on perfectionism at this time. I feel like there's a little bit of a background story to this because my mom, she's an alcoholic.
Oh, yeah.
And during this time, my mom was married to her second or third husband. And I moved probably like 9 or 10 houses growing up after my parents split. They split when I was 9. And so there was so much anxiety. And like
Chaos.
my sister, who's schizophrenic now, as you know, Chelsea, love her so much.
She's our girl. She's gonna be listening.
She was really going through it during this time, and so I was kind of like the forgotten child. And so I was expected to be perfect, and I knew I could be. I figured out how to do that at a young age. So when I was obviously in high school, found a guy. Thank God Jesus saved him. I'm married to him now. But he was not a great guy. And I didn't have a good track record like you have great guys because I watched my mom be around like abusive men, physically, emotionally, abusive to her, abusive to us. And I'm talking like 10 to 15 relationships she was in by the time I was, 15. And so there was a lot there where I felt like, sex and things like that were going to make somebody love me. So I started having sex at a young age. I was like 13, maybe 12. Yeah. I was
didn't
drinking
know
and
that
doing
part
drugs
about
at
you.
12, 13.
Wow.
Because I was going back and forth to both houses too with my parents, but there was not a sole custody provider. And so my dad was trying to work it out with my mom. And so I would just swing back and forth. It was just super unstable all the time. And cell phones weren't around yet. And so I had to like find a house phone or sneak off and call them so you'd come get us. So super unstable. And so when I was 14 and I met my boyfriend at the time, he was a junior, super popular. We had sex, I think, the first time we met.
Yeah.
First time we met.
Yeah. Well, that's all you knew.
And that was super
I mean,
normal
yeah.
for high school culture
Yeah,
back
for
in
sure.
the
Oh,
2000s.
100%. Yeah.
Because it was just, be cool, go to the football games, do this, do that.
Yeah, have sex.
And so
have some
I got
shots.
pregnant pretty quickly with him. I was 14. And I remember like I knew I was pregnant. I like knew because I was late on my period and my boobs hurt and I was like, you're kidding me, And my mom's like raging alcoholic during this time too. It's not like, we were like okay. I mean, she was just wiling out. And my stepdad, I hope to God he hears this one day, was a horrible human being. And he had 3 other children that lived in the house with us, but me and my sister were treated like peasants, like not important. Like we would get old stuff. They would get all the new stuff. Their oldest daughter, gosh, her name was Samantha. That's all you need to know about her. And I hope she's well because she was a shitty person. Hey, Samantha. But
I'm so sorry. That's terrible.
yeah, like she had the big room and her dad would buy her all the comforters. And so this was like my second house though. And so my dad's house was my main house. And so when I'd go to this house, it was just awful.
But you felt like an outsider, Oh
yeah, it was terrible. And then at school, I'm like perfect, super popular.
Yeah.
So it's like I was very disassociative at a super young age. So I get pregnant the first time and like I said, I knew I was pregnant. I took the test and everything, and I didn't want to tell anybody.
Did you tell anybody?
I ended up telling my mom and my best friend. I told my best friend first, and I knew I was pregnant, knew it. So by the time I told my mom, I'll never forget it. I was at her house and in the bedroom that I shared, that wasn't really my room, and I told her, and she was just real okay, this is what we're going to do. There wasn't really conversation, right, about we can make this work. It was, you're not going to be popular anymore. You're not going to be
Your mom
captain of
said
the cheer
that.
team. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And she was like, you're never going to go to college. You're never going to be nobody. So you need to get this done. I'll take you. And I was like, please don't tell my dad. And I've told you that. I was like, please don't tell my dad, Mom. Like, don't do it. Of course she told him.
Did you tell Justin at the time?
I told him after I told my best friend Dannon and my mom, and then I told him, and he was pretty quick to be like, you need to handle it. Bye. So he broke up with me. And so by the time I go and get the ultrasound and stuff, I was way too far along to get to take like the Plan B or pills or any of that. So I had to get a full mechanical abortion. And I remember getting it, and the room was like so cold, and it was like just so much trauma in that. And then I remember like, my mom took me home, and then I had like one day, I think I was at home, then right back to school normal. Well, then like 7 months later, I get pregnant again. Same thing happens. He breaks up with me.
Back to back.
At this point, I'm like, I know what it feels like to be pregnant. I need to go ahead and handle this. So then I was able to get the pills.
Did you tell? Who did you tell that time?
I did not tell my mom that time. I
Yeah.
only told my best friend, and then I told Justin because I knew where to get Plan B from, and I had a license. Or Dannon did. She was a year older than me.
Yeah.
So we went, shout out to Dannon, I love you, girl. We went and got the Plan B pills, and I went right back to school. So I was having the abortion at school, like in class.
Gosh.
In my cheer uniform, had a game
my
that night, all
gosh.
that. And my parents were not in any place for me. I'm not going to talk to my dad about it because he's my dad and like my hero. And my mom's not trustworthy, clearly. So I just kind of dealt with it. And then, some things that it really affected for me was my self-worth.
Yeah.
I felt super shameful. I felt like I started drinking a lot, even more, doing a lot of bonfire house parties, a lot of lying, a lot of staying the night in fields and places I shouldn't be in.
We sound like the same person.
I wasn't in church at all, like really, like I was growing up. But then when my parents split, the church that we went to, actually, my stepmom told me this, was really mean to my stepmom. After her and my dad got married, I literally found this out a few months ago, and it broke my heart. And so that kind of cut church, because the church was like, nah, she's the stepmom, she's not welcome here. And so
That's a whole other subject.
yeah. And so it really affected, it made me have to feel like I need to cover things up. This is why it's taken a long time for me to like be vulnerable, to trust people, to feel confident, to feel purposeful. I feel like I've really held myself back.
But you tell me some things that you did to really heal from that. Because I can tell, like,
Yeah.
You've done so much work. I'm so proud of you. I'm sorry that I wasn't there. I just, it's just, I know what it feels like to feel alone.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It was it's super tough because like those are God's children.
Yeah.
And so thankfully when I was in therapy, my therapist was like, hey, I know you're mentioning this to me, to loop back around to that. She was like, I know you're mentioning abortion. She was like, there's actually a woman here that works at the front, and she helps run an abortion Bible study to break you free of that chain. And I was like, cool, like, we'll do it. When is it? This is on like a Friday. She's like, it's Tuesday, and you got to come to Raleigh every Tuesday night. There's going to be 6 girls that are in it. You're not going to know their names. Nobody's going to disclose any of that. And there's a book you got to buy. And I was like, why not? You know what I mean? Me and you weren't talking. Our whole friendship collided. It was just such a rough time. And I was like, what do I have to lose? I couldn't even talk to my own husband about it. And so I did it. And I'm so like happy to say that I've like broken free from that since then. And it was a really big moment for me. So yeah, and we're going to drop some resources at the end of this podcast so all of you guys can have information if you're looking for a place with abortion healing therapy. I'd never heard of one before this place.
Yeah.
And also information on like mental health, and if you've had thoughts too of suicide or depression. I know, Kristen, you didn't say this, but I know the depression and thoughts you have walked through. And,
Oh, yeah.
I've been through that too. I remember looking at myself in the mirror and being like, if I didn't have my kids, I don't think I would be here. And so
100%.
like
100%.
I've thought about like driving off the road.
Yeah.
I've thought about
I've thought about literally driving off the road and then hitting a tree.
Thought about jumping out of a car. Like I've thought about all these things. And like, it's straight from the enemy. And the enemy doesn't want stuff like this to be said, because when it is, women start experiencing freedom.
Yes.
And that is truly what I believe is holding women back from the calling God has called them to, and being able to show up messy and show up imperfect because they don't have the tools. And so I'm just so thankful that God, you know, has brought me to these places of therapy and healing, because it's really like a two-edged sword. You need both. You can't just have like, oh, I'm doing all these mental health and self-care days. You've really got to get healing and restoration on that, so you can know too it wasn't your fault. Like, it wasn't my fault. And even though I chose abortion then, it doesn't mean I would have chose it now, but I can't go back, right? And you can't go back and say, should you have went to the party or should you not have? Should you have, like,
we got to move on from that.
Yes.
We cannot dwell on, if I hadn't undone this, this wouldn't have happened. Like, we cannot dwell on that at all. We have to move on from that. And one thing I wanted to say, what was I just going to say? I lost it. But I do want to say, I'm so proud of you. Like, I know that for 5 years you put the work in.
Yeah.
And I think that people don't realize that, like, once you start putting the work in, just like what you did, God opened that door, that there was randomly that, you know, little group for the abort, you know, like, that happened because of God. But in order for you to really heal and get through things, number one, you've got to say it out loud that this happened to me, you know, and I didn't do that for a very long time. And the more you put that deep down inside, literally, the more your life is going to become a toxic environment in every way, shape, and form, in relationships, with yourself, with your body, with everything. So you have to heal from stuff. And if you don't, you're just going to be a damn hot mess express, you know? And what people don't realize too is that if you don't heal from stuff like your kids, it affects your parenting. It affects all of it. So your kids are gonna, they deserve the best version of you. That's all.
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
yeah.
So, you know, just to wrap it up with you guys.
Woo!
You know, we know this was heavy. We know it was a lot. But we also know that if these two moments like marked places in our life, then for sure you guys are probably relating to something we said. But, you know, healing is there, man. It's there. It's out there. There's resources. There's help. Like, you are not alone.
No.
And it's so easy, like, Kristen, like you said, like, to feel alone and to feel stupid, worthless, insignificant, no help at church,
The
no
enemy
help
will
here
do
with these
anything,
things.
and he'll use anything to make you feel that way. That's not God, and that's not people. And even when you feel the most alone, you always have one person. You always have one person that loves you and cares about you that you can call. And I know what it feels like to be so down that you don't even want to pick up the phone, but that's when you should the most.
Yeah.
So
we love you guys. We are really happy to be here with y'all and just to be in this space. And we talked about this before we started the podcast. If it helps one person in their life and where they're at, then we've done our job. And so we're going to share the resources after this podcast so y'all can have access to some of the tools that have helped us. And we'll see you guys next week. Bye.